is a reversion of rights when it comes to your novel? This is when you are going to sell your book to a traditional publisher, and then due to some circumstances, you are getting the rights back from your publisher. Now, we've done a ton of episodes with our lawyer on the legal side of book contracts and working with traditional publishers, so make sure you go through that playlist. It's really important to help keep you safe in this industry because there's a lot of red flags and green flags that you need to be paying attention to when it comes to those book contracts before you sign it. But once you have sold your book to a traditional publisher, that means they're in charge. They get to make all the decisions, and they may consult you, but they don't have to consult you because they've gotten the rights to your book. You sign that away with a traditional contract. And at some point, you may have those rights reverted back to you, meaning we are no longer, as a traditional publisher, touching your book. This is all in your hands now. Everything goes back to you. You make all the decisions. We are no longer in ownership of this. So when it comes to a reversion of rights, there are a couple of different reasons for this. The first and the most common is that the term of the contract has run out. Typically, when you're signing a contract with a traditional publisher, it usually is for 5 years. Sometimes with some of those bigger publishing houses, like the big ones, it's going to be longer because they know that they want to make money for it or from it from a long time. And so they might sign you a little bit longer, but typically we're seeing about 5 years as standard. Sometimes with the smaller publishers, you can negotiate it down or you can negotiate for more money. There's a lot of wiggle room in there, especially when you're working with your publishing lawyer, as you always should be. And when you run out, you can then decide, I'm taking the rights back to my book, or I'll sign another contract for a certain amount of time that you can continue to sell this book if you have handled it well during the course of our original contract. And so you can then choose when it runs out how you want to handle that based on what your contract says. Now, your contract should absolutely spell out reversion of rights, how it's coming back to you, what they're required to do. Are they required to give you the edited manuscript, the final touches that they made on these things? Are they required to give you the cover, which probably isn't going to happen in most cases? Are they just giving you back what you had originally turned in? Like, what are the terms here? They'll also have some type of term. And for some people, they may have like, you can't publish it for a certain amount of time. That's pretty scammy, so just be careful of that. But most of them will say, hey, listen, you're getting your rights back, but you cannot put it on pre-order before it's out of our custody, which some authors have tried to do, and it doesn't go well. So the terminology around that contract clause is going to be very important. It's going to tell you the next steps. It also is going to tell you how you need to proceed with that. So if you are intending on taking your rights back after the term is up, you have to know what you need to do, what paperwork you need to submit, what documentation you're going to need from them. They're going to have to give you documentation on like how much money your book has made and all of the final things. So there's a lot of stuff that has to be in that clause, and your lawyer is going to be able to help you go over that. It's really important to have a lawyer when you sign a contract to protect you, because the publishing houses are just protecting themselves. They're not protecting you. So another reason for that rights of reversion could be that they didn't uphold their end of the deal. If they are not fulfilling the contract, you can potentially get that back early. So you have the option to exercise these clauses that are going to allow you to have that back if they have failed to do X, Y, and Z. And in that case, you're going to have to submit certain paperwork. You might have to request audits. Like there's stuff. There's also potentially things that you're going to have to pay for. So if they are not doing what they're supposed to be doing and you have to request an audit, the audit might be paid for by you. It might not be something that they're going to pay for. All of this is going to be spelled out in the contract. And of course, sometimes there are going to be clauses for those rights reversions where you can buy yourself out of a contract. If you get into a relationship with a company and you decide you don't want to work with them, you could potentially buy those rights back. I knew somebody many, many years ago, long before I became an author, who started to publish her novels, and her first book came out. Her second book was with this new publisher. And when her first book came out with a different publisher, she got one negative review and kind of panicked and had a full-on crisis on what she wanted to do. And she was so nervous about it and so scared about what was going to happen. She actually had to buy out her contract for that second book with that other publisher, and it was never published. It was never out in the public space because she pulled it early. They had already done the work to edit it, to do covers, to do all the design work, like everything was ready to go. And she decided she wanted to buy herself out of the contract, and that cost her pretty dearly because they had done so much other work and they had already purchased it and they were already planning marketing for it and all of these things. So you potentially can be buying yourself out of a contract to get those rights reverted early, but that's usually not something we want to see you do. It's usually going to be pretty detrimental to what you're doing. So you have to be smart about who you're signing with, why you're signing with them, and that you have a legal representative going through it to make sure that you really are covered when you go into these relationships, especially with these smaller and medium-sized publishers, because you don't know what some of them might do behind the scenes once you get in there. So rights reversions are really important to pay attention to inside of your contract. Again, most people do not pull their books early from a publisher. Most people do not have to ask for their rights back early because their publisher is doing things that they shouldn't be doing or violating the contract that they have with them. And most people will then decide when they get to the end of a contract to take their rights back or to go ahead and sign on for more. Do not just let that lapse. Don't just kind of get to the end of your contract and just kind of let it ride. You have to make sure you have more legal documentation signed with that. So make sure you're on top of that if your contract is going to run out, because you don't just want to continue to let them have ownership over something without some type of legal documentation outlining what's going on. Get with your lawyer, have those conversations. But you can then also negotiate these things. So it's not ironclad that you have to sign exactly what they hand you, especially when you've got your lawyer. You can go through and you can kind of redline some of these things and say, okay, we need to fix this, we need to tweak this, we need to change the terms on this. I personally, when I work with traditional publishers, I have in the past changed the length of my contract. So instead of 5 years, they only had ownership over it for 3 years, and I took my rights back very early. And that's because I had the foresight to know how this was probably going to play out because of the publishing house that I was working with and the things that they were doing. And I had my connections there. So I was willing to try it, but I wasn't willing to try it for 5 years. And so I negotiated my contract, unlike the other people at this publishing house who then got stuck with this publisher who was kind of a deadbeat publisher and didn't do very much for them, and then passed them off to another publisher when they closed their house. And so for me, I negotiated that down. And the literal second that it ran out, I knocked right on that door. Actually, I let them know a little bit earlier, hey, we're just about the end of our contracts. What do we need to do? How do we need to wrap all of these things up? So that they had a month or two to kind of get their ducks in a row before we moved on. Because when rights revert, companies have to take all your stuff down. So very specifically for my case and for most people's cases, if the rights are going to revert, they come back to you on a specific day. And at that point, that company is going to have all those files down. They're going to have to stop printing the paperback and the hardcover. They're going to have the ebook removed from purchase so people can't get it. They're going to have certain paperwork in your hands. And there's some stuff that they have to do. They have to get their ducks in a row and then give this to you by the appropriate time. And likewise, as the author, you cannot step on their toes. If it is still in their ownership, you can't have a pre-order up. You cannot be selling this book. You can't be doing your own prints. You can get things ready. You can get your files ready in advance so that you're not taking 2 months to get everything ready after it reverts to you, so that the day it comes back to you, yes, you can absolutely put up your pre-order, but you cannot do it before. So nothing can be out in public and you can't be talking about it until the time that it reverts to you. So you have to be very careful and very specific about what you're doing and have a plan in mind. Know your exit strategy, even if you don't intend on exercising it. When I signed with that one publisher, I knew I wanted that shorter term because I wasn't sure if I was going to be happy with them or not. I wasn't sure if it was going to be a productive and fruitful relationship, and it was not. And so I had the time to get everything ready. I had the time to get everything prepared, and I had an exit strategy before I even signed it. I knew what I was going to do and how I was going to handle it. Now, as I'm starting to do things with other entities, I have a plan in mind, but it doesn't necessarily mean I'm going to exercise it. So if you're going to be signing with somebody, you just need to have a plan. And it's not like a worst case disaster plan. It can be, when I reach the end of this 5-year contract, what happens if I choose to not go with them again and walk away? Or what happens if they choose to not renew that contract? Because they can very much do that. If they get to the end of those 5 years and say, well, this has been great, thanks so much, here's your stuff, what do? You have to have some kind of plan. So how are you going to handle this? Are you going to self-publish it? Are you going to try going somewhere else? Some people will take it from one small publisher to another small publisher And sometimes they accept that. Sometimes they don't. Sometimes they do. So have plans, have ideas, have just an awareness of what it means, what you need to do, and be very, very aware of those clauses and how they are worded and what they say, and make sure that you have paperwork, because if at any point you have to submit certain paperwork or certain things, you need to have records of those things. You need to have them ready. And it's better to do that as you go instead of trying to figure all that out in the moment if something should happen where you need to get yourself out of a bad situation. So knowing these things and being prepared in case there is a rights reversion on your part, on their part, on everybody's part, whatever it happens to be, understand it and have a plan for it to make sure that you can continue to function as an author. Okay, if you've got questions, let's go ahead and drop it down below. Like I said, we've done tons of episodes with our lawyer on the contract side of the publishing industry in our legal playlist. I have linked that in the caption, so scroll down, check that out, go through all those things. He comes back all the time for new episodes, and so we will continue to be getting your questions answered. If you have specific things on this or something similar to this, now is the time to go ahead and drop those and follow along for daily videos helping you navigate the world of your author life. Bonus points, we have a membership here on the YouTube channel. If you follow that membership, you get access to special videos from me where I'm telling you exactly what I'm doing without exception. I'm telling you what's going on in my author career. So I have several big things that I'm doing right this very second. If you're watching this as it comes out, I have big things that I am doing connected to some of the stuff we talked about today. And I'm telling you what's going on. I'm not holding back. So if you're a member, you know what's going on. You know how this is impacting me, how it's impacting you, what I'm doing to navigate these things so that you can do it as well. But we also have daily free videos here helping you navigate the world of publishing, from your writing to your publishing to your marketing, to make this your most profitable and most fun author year ever. We'll see you tomorrow.